Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, 80. It's a big one. Veganism has been good to me.
Yes. Welcome to the Gentle Finds podcast. I'm so thrilled to introduce Jeffrey Masson, a New York Times bestselling author who started his career as a professor of Sanskrit at the University of Toronto and then became the director of the Freud archives, which led him to publish possibly the most controversial book in psychoanalysis of the 20th century, The Assault on Truth. And he spent the rest of his career investigating the emotional world of animals and is the author of some 31 books, including When Elephants Weep, The Emotional Lives of Animals, The Pig Who Sang to the Moon, A Peaceable Kingdom, Dogs Never Lie About Love, and his most recent book, which is now for sale in bookstores and online, and which we'll be talking about a bit more today, Lost Companions. So you have had such an incredible career. 31 books is just a part of it, right?
That's right. I wouldn't even say the most important part.
Okay. And when I look at you online, I see that your life really had a big kind of dramatic moment when you decided to become the director of the Freud archives, right? And it led you sort of on this new path.
That's right.
Do you want to talk about the unfolding of writing The Assault on Truth a bit and what happened there?
Sure. So I trained as a psychoanalyst in Toronto for 10 years. And I was very disappointed. I can still remember the day when we started talking about child sexual abuse. And one of the senior analysts who was teaching the course said, "You realize, of course, that's only a female fantasy. Mm-hmm. There is no such thing, or it's so rare you will never see it. You will never see a case of incest. It's all in the head of the women." And I said, "I beg your pardon, that sounds absolutely absurd and ridiculous."
Yeah, extremely.
Say such a thing?
Yeah.
So I did not endear myself to the analyst at the time. I was a mere student and complaining about this. And he basically told me to shut up and wait until I had more experience and read more Freud, and then I would understand.
Right.
And I never did.
And I mean, were you dealing with mostly men in that field at the time? Were there women who were on the same page there?
No, there were not. There were a few women who supported me later.
Okay.
In mostly Muriel Gardner. I don't know if that name means anything to you, but she was an extraordinary analyst in Vienna, a close friend of Anna Freud, knew Freud very well. She was a wealthy American heiress. The film Julia was about her.
Okay.
She was very brave, and she saved a lot of people, especially Jews, in Vienna. She was not herself Jewish. She had vast wealth. She was a lovely woman, and she liked me very much. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, I remember the day she said, "You know what, Jeff? You're a terrible listener. You'll never be a good analyst. You shouldn't do it." And I agreed with her.
Honesty, I guess.
She said, "You should become a scholar. You're good at research." And she talked to Eisler, and that's how I eventually came. And she talked to Anna Freud. And that's how I came to direct the Freud archive. So it was partly a way of deflecting me from inflicting myself.
Get this guy out of here. Yeah.
Yeah, they did not want me seeing patients.
Okay. Yeah, and so you sort of ruffled some feathers. Once you got into the archives, you discovered surprising information, we could say.
Well, that's right. I had never given up the idea that women were telling the truth. Mm-hmm. And Freud believed this initially. He had a beautiful paper in 1896 called The Etiology of Hysteria, which he gave to a group. And as your question, were there any women present? No, there were no women present. Yeah. He talked about the sexual abuse of all of his patients. He said, "I have 18 patients in analysis. 12 of them are women, 6 are men. They have all been traumatized in childhood, almost exclusively via sexual abuse." And his audience gasped, the men.
Mm-hmm.
Partly, of course, I mean, I would give anything to recreate that moment. What it was that he was saying to these men, some of you are abusers, as
Yeah.
indeed they were,
Which was
because he was
unthinkable.
seeing mostly the children of his colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
So he was very brave to say that. It was a beautiful paper. It's still worth reading today.
Okay.
And I give a new translation of it in The Assault on Truth. And his colleagues mocked him. They made fun of him. The man in the chair, Kraft Ebing, who was only interested in sexual perversions, responded by saying, this sounds like a scientific fairy tale. It's simply not true, gentlemen. And Freud was deeply disappointed. They laughed at him. They walked away shaking their head. And I think that was a very pivotal moment in his life, because either he would go with the women,
right,
his patients, and some
which
of the men,
wouldn't bring him
or
anywhere.
he would cave.
Right. Yeah.
And ultimately, I mean, for a short time, he did stay with the women. He wrote a famous, to me, a letter that was not published by Anna Freud, in which he said, they can all go to hell. I'm going to publish this. I believe I'm right.
Wow.
I'm sure I'm right. And then gradually he came to renounce that. And that was called, he called it the theory of seduction. What it really was a commentary on rape, the rape of children. And he believed it very strongly for a few years. But we were taught when we were in our seminars, becoming psychoanalysts, that he'd made a terrible mistake and that he recognized this mistake. Now, I wanted to know more of how that would happen. How did Freud suddenly realize, oh no, these 18 people were all lying to me? How could that happen?
Yeah.
So I told Anna Freud quite openly, look, Miss Freud, I'm sorry, with all due respect, I just don't believe this story. It doesn't sound plausible. May I see the letters that you kept back from the Freud Fleece edition that she published in 1950? And at first she said no.
Because she had published his works, but she had omitted what she wanted.
She omitted 165 letters, which she claimed, and I think she may even have believed it, they were nobody's business. They were not of any scientific interest. They were personal, and they would never see the light of day. So I asked to see them. And at first she was very reluctant, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And basically said no. And I was very disappointed and was leaving her house when her Chow Chow, her dog, came running up to me, and I started playing with the dog. And she said, you like dogs? I said, I love dogs. She said, sit down, we'll talk some more.
Oh.
So she loved dogs, and she loved the fact that I love dogs. And eventually she said, okay, I think you're going to be very disappointed, but if you want to, I'll let you see these unpublished letters. But you have to learn German. So I had to go off to Vienna and Germany, and came back with enough German to read these letters. And it's a very long story, and I won't repeat it here, but eventually I did find material that absolutely demonstrated that Freud did not give up the idea so easily. He believed it for a long time. And in fact, in the letters that she did not publish, he gave more evidence that it was true. And there was one beautiful letter, I think it was the longest letter that Freud ever wrote as a clinical case history, to his, at the time, best friend, Wilhelm Fliess, an ear, nose, and throat specialist from Berlin. He said, Wilhelm, I believe I found more proof that fathers are to blame for sexual problems of their children. And he gave a very elaborate case history of a woman he was treating who had been raped at the age of 3 by her father. And he said, I believe this because I know her father. And then Anna Freud, and then he said, Wilhelm, I have a new motto for my new science of psychoanalysis. Poor child, what have they done to you? And Anna, which I think is the most beautiful thing Freud ever said.
Yeah.
And Anna Freud took a red pencil through it and said, not for publication. So I approached her with all this material, and I said, Miss Freud, again, I revere you and you're Freud's daughter, but you cannot say this is not of historic importance. This is immensely important.
Right.
And whatever you or I believe it's real, you believe it's not, but that's irrelevant. We have to let people decide for themselves.
Yeah.
And she eventually gave in. I must say it was very generous of her. It must have been a tremendous battle within herself because she sincerely believed her father was wrong. And it's interesting, I hope one day someone will write about this. They haven't yet, but at the very end of her life, so a few years later, she wrote a paper about child sexual abuse. I like to think I had something to do with that.
Possibly, you must have got her thinking. Yeah, I imagine.
But it got her thinking.
Yeah.
And she said it is the most terrible thing that can happen to a child. But it was just a line at the very end of her life. In any event, she did allow me to become the head of the Freud copyright as well as the archives. So it was up to me to publish this, and I did. But before I could do that, word got out that I was doing this in the analytic world, and all hell broke loose. They started calling on a Freud. The analysts in New York were deeply upset. I gave a paper about it, and they were furious. They blamed me for being, paranoid. You believe these women, these hysterical women. You're destroying psychoanalysis. And
it
then
makes
the New York
no
Times
sense.
reported it, and it led to a tremendous brouhaha. Patients came in and said, well, wait a minute, doctor. I told you I was abusing. You told me it was a fantasy. Now here's this evidence that I was telling the truth. What are you to make of that? So it was a real scandal.
Yeah.
But the response of the analysts was to fire me. So they didn't do any soul searching, unlike Anna Freud.
I mean, to be honest, it doesn't take a lot of soul searching. I mean, it's shocking to me.
Look around them and ask a few people.
Yeah.
I remember once in Holland when I gave basically what I'm telling you, and the audience was enraged. And I finally, and there were a lot of women in the room. I said, are there any women in this room who've been abused? And they were absolutely furious that I would ask such a question. And the moderator intervened. He said, that question is illegitimate. Do not answer that. This man is a madman.
Wow.
So we're talking 1981. It was simply not acceptable.
Yeah.
But we have progressed a huge amount, but it's still not easy. It's still not easy.
I was actually wondering when I was hearing this whole story, when the Me Too movement hit, you must have had flashbacks to this period of your life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was delighted to see it, of course.
Yeah.
It's so important. And I mean, it's still a mystery to me how they managed to take over the world, because they did. And as you know, in France, this has become only very, very recently has this become real. You had this horrendous case of Masson. Well, I don't need to tell you, you know all about that.
Yeah.
Who was writing openly about sleeping with very young children, including boys of 7 or 8 years old, and getting prizes from it in Paris.
Yeah.
And, some of the greatest French writers were saying, this is genius. The man deserves a Nobel Prize. And they gave him like at least 3 major prizes. Gallimard published him.
Yeah. I
mean, we're not talking about some madman here. And it was only when Consent, Le Consentement, was published just a few months ago, I believe, or a few weeks ago. I just finished reading it, a remarkable book, wonderful book. And she blew the lid on him. And now suddenly people are talking about it. I think it's because women now have taken back their power and they say, we will not be silenced.
Well, someone needs to write the screenplay of what unraveled there.
I'm surprised that it hasn't been done, because there have been so many films about Freud. In fact, there was a wonderful one just a few weeks ago in the New York Times. It was one of those short films, 13 minutes, The Case of Dora. And in the New Yorker, of all places, they said this was thanks to the work of Jeffrey Masson. So I did get a little bit of vindication from that. Didn't last very long, but my 12 minutes of fame was okay.
Yeah.
But there's a sea change in the world right now.
Oh yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
And you speak a bit about that because then you went on from that. You got expelled from the psychoanalytic
I was expelled.
community.
Yeah, they took away. Well, actually, they didn't take away my license to practice, but I didn't want to practice after that. They expelled me from all the societies, took away my job. Then
that
Janet
must have been
Malcolm
just
wrote
horrible.
a piece about me for the New Yorker.
Yeah.
Very upsetting. And I realized my career as an academic was over, or even as a serious scholar. So I thought, well, I'll turn to animals. I love animals. Animals are more interesting than people.
That little dog at Anna's house was the first sign of where your life was going to go.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And so then you went on to write the emotional lives of animals, right? When elephants weep.
Yes, when elephants weep.
Yeah. And back then, when did you write that? What year was that? Do you remember?
Well, it was a long time ago.
Okay. Because you were one of the
30 years ago.
Yeah, and you really were kind of pioneering the idea of taking that seriously.
Not popular.
No.
I mean, it was popular among people.
Again, not popular.
So people felt vindicated. Well, I've always known that. People said it's 1 million copies, so I can't complain. But scientists ridiculed it. They said this is absurd. This is pure anthropomorphism. He's just imagining what animals experience based on his own emotional lives. We have no evidence that any animal has any emotional experience. And that's gone now too. That's completely past.
So
I don't think there's a scientist alive who would make that comment.
Thankfully, yeah.
Again, I feel vindicated about that.
Totally.
And it wasn't as vitriolic, I have to say. I mean, people avoided me, scientists, but I didn't really care. I was living at the time with the great legal scholar Catherine McKinnon, who was doing her groundbreaking research on sexual harassment. So I got a lot of help from her, and she loved what I was doing. And we had met over the Assault on Truth. So I was very happy to be doing that, and I was kind of living with her in isolation up in the hills near the ocean, south of San Francisco, and it was lovely. I enjoyed it.
Beautiful. Yeah. What was it that brought you to care so much about animals? What made you decide this is worth doing?
Well, there was a book called The Question of Animal Awareness. I'm trying to remember his name. I've forgotten his name for the moment. I shouldn't, because he was a great, great scholar.
That's okay.
This is the man, he was a professor at Harvard who discovered bat sonar. So he was a major, major scientist. And he wrote this book, The Question of Animal Awareness, which was timid but beautiful. So I called him and I said, here I am on this ranch. I don't have much to do. I'm not a professor of Sanskrit anymore. I'm not a psychoanalyst. I want to write about animal emotions. And I noticed that you didn't take that up in your wonderful book. And he said, oh, my goodness, Jeff, if you knew how I was attacked just for suggesting that animals were aware. He said, if I had dared to say anything about their emotional life, I would have lost all credibility in the scientific world. But you don't have any credibility, so you may as well write about it. And I did.
Yeah.
So he was the first to suggest that to me. And I thought at first, the truth is I just wanted to do a year of reading about animal emotions, but there was nothing to read then. So we're talking a little bit later, 1990. But in any event, all the books that were later to come out, excellent books, like Mama's Last Hug. And there's so many books now on animal emotions. Carl Safina writes about it. DeWall writes about it. They write about it very well. And every day there's some new discovery. Today in Australia, they discovered that teeny fish love to listen to rap music.
No.
Dance to it. I mean, it's just amazing how many things we're learning on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that I got into that. And I did get into it partially because of psychoanalysis.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is one of the things that did intrigue me, I mean, I never completely thought of Freud as a fraud, or I thought he lost his moral courage. He couldn't stick with what he knew, but he was still a remarkable man. He beautiful writer.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what he wrote is still resonates today. And one phrase in particular always stuck with me. He wrote once, "A man can be in love with a woman for many years and not know it until years later." I thought, what is that? And I thought it's true.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's true.
Yeah, I'm sure it's true.
And it's a terrible indictment of our species because no other animal is capable of that kind of self-deception.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if a cat's angry, you see it. They're not going to pretend.
Uh-huh.
A dog will never pretend they like you when they don't, or pretend
Right.
they
Dogs
don't
never
like you
lie.
when they do.
Yeah.
You know, it's just what you see is what you get with animals.
Right. It's
and that
pure.
intrigued
Yeah.
me. I thought, wow, animals are possibly more profound than us when it comes to feelings, because there's nothing mediating their feelings. They don't have the language that we have. They don't sit down and write about their feelings. They just feel them.
Yeah.
And that's what led me to write about dogs. Because dogs were the best example. I mean, I believe that of many animals, but how much can you know about wild
Exactly.
elephants? Not
Yeah.
that much, really.
Yeah. We have
You
much
can't
more
live with them.
interaction.
You can't
Yeah,
even live with
dogs.
a wolf, but you can live with a dog, and that's as close as we come to a wild animal, dogs
Yeah.
and cats. And it was clear that dogs lived in the present, in the moment, and whatever they felt, you saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And they acknowledged it. They didn't try and hide it. So that really got me going, and it led me to wonder, which I haven't written about because it's very hard to write about.
Another book. I see it.
I'm too late. I'm turning 80 this month. I don't have another book in
Birthday.
me. So my question is, are there emotions that animals feel that we cannot?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have access to emotions that are unknown to us? Now that would be very hard to write about, but it's such an intriguing notion.
Hard to find, hard to really discover. I mean,
well, that's right.
How would
it's
you
almost impossible
create the experiment?
I'm sure it's true.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's true.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, go ahead.
I mean, I do believe that it's not that difficult, though nobody agrees with me. Well, now there are probably some people, but they do have, certain animals have feelings like we do more intensely than we do.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe, for example, that you cannot, no human is as content as a cat when a cat's content. You just can't. You know, they stretch their little body out. And they
you do that so well.
And they don't have a thought in the world. They're just happy. Mm-hmm. And dogs, I mean, have a capacity for friendship far beyond ours.
Yeah.
And for joie de vivre.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they just love being alive, and you know, they dance around sand with them.
I'm not sure which book it was of yours where you mention a spider and you touch on that. You say, you know, it's possible that a spider has a whole range of emotions that we are not experiencing. And you think about that actually, when you think of animals and they're created differently, you know, a spider makes a spider web and they have all these superpowers, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And if you think about it,
you know, it's interesting because we don't doubt their physical superpowers.
Exactly.
We can't spin a web.
No,
we
because
can't fly.
If
we can't swim in the ocean.
Yeah.
We can't run like a little puppy. I mean, there's so many things we can't do. We acknowledge that very easily. But if you say to somebody just casually on the street, you know, a dog feels a lot more love than you do, they would be outraged.
Yeah, we're superior. Right? That's the thinking.
That's right. You cannot get away from that. And I think we are slowly getting away from that.
That's the next big
that's the next big move. I agree.
Yeah.
Too late for me, but you can do it.
Okay. I'll work on it. And you were also born a vegetarian.
I was. So my parents raised me as a vegetarian.
In the 1940s, which was...
Until the age, well, I got very involved with Indian mysticism for the first, I'd say, 22 years of my life.
Okay.
So I was supposed to become the successor to our guru, whose name was Paul Brunton. He's forgotten now, but he once was a figure of great importance in the world of Indian mysticism. He introduced Ramana Maharshi to the West. He did a series of books in the 40s and 50s about Indian mysticism. And my father became a disciple of his. His name is Paul Brunton. And he moved in with us and lived with us for many years on and off. And I was supposed to become his successor, but I left the fold.
Okay.
Like, just as I did with psychoanalysis.
Yeah. Well, you found your way. You found your calling, I think.
I did.
With animals. And so you finished with Lost Companions, right?
Yes.
This is your most recent. And it has a dog and a cat on the cover, but you speak about so many different types of companions, even bears.
Even bears, yeah. That's one of my favorite stories in there.
Yeah, go ahead. You can...
What's his name? Charlie Russell. Charlie Russell was a self-taught, world-class expert on bears, and he went out to the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia. And they said there was nobody living there, and the Russians gave him permission if he would build himself a little plane and fly out, which he did. I don't know how he did that. And he built a little cabin. Some people are so
amazing. Yeah.
And then he lived there, and the Russians would send him baby bears that were having problems in zoos, and he would rehabilitate them and release them into the wild. The problem was these bears then became very attached to him and were not frightened of humans. And hunters realized this and began hunting them. And in the end, he had to leave. But there's one tragic great story.
Oh, you called them peace-loving animals in the book.
Well, they were. I mean, once he was sitting down, and a mother bear came by with two cubs. Now, everybody who knows anything about bears knows that the most dangerous animal in the wild is a mother bear with her cubs, because they're always afraid. I mean, male bears often kill them and eat them, and humans shoot them. So mother bears don't trust anybody. But this mother bear, he thought, oh, that's the end for me. But the mother bear came in, and she pushed the two little baby bears toward him, and then she left.
Wow.
And he suddenly realized, oh my God, she's asking me to babysit her babies while she goes off to hunt. And the only explanation he could give is that she'd been observing him and noticed how he took care of these little bears who were sent to him and then sent them off into the wild. So she knew he was trustworthy. I just find that so heartwarming that this mother bear recognized a decent, kind, compassionate human being. Absolutely. And left her children with him.
Yeah. And it makes me think too of the story of Christian the lion, and you speak about the lion who was raised in London by some people, and then they go back. Everyone has seen this on YouTube, probably. Yes. They go back after he's released into the wild in Africa, and he's created his own family, and they're not sure how he'll react, and they find him, and he sees them and runs towards them and hugs them. And you write about that, and you say it's an eye into well, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Maybe I have written it somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, you say it tells us something of what the natural world would be like if all humans treated other animals as friends rather than as food or enemies.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm very good friends with the man who had them as cubs.
Oh, wow.
He's still around. He's my age. He's here. He's a lovely man. He's an art collector now.
Yeah.
We often meet. he loves to retell the story of Christian the Lion.
And I think it's because you, through all of your research and writing, you have developed an understanding of animals to a degree that I think most of us don't have. We have our pets, we have our dogs and cats, but I think the internet and seeing videos like that is helping people kind of think and question their beliefs about what is going on with animals and their capacities for emotion.
Definitely. And I think more and more people are coming to this. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that people are changing their diet. And even if they change their diet for health reasons or because of the planet, the environment, it still reminds them that they're not killing animals when they do that.
Right. And that it's not necessary.
It's absolutely unnecessary.
Yeah.
So that was a conclusion I reached. I mean, I'd been raised vegetarian, then as an adult at Harvard, I gave it up. I think, I don't know why. I'd like to think about that a bit more. Why did I do that? But eventually when I wrote When Elephants Weep, I came back to it because I realized, well, you can't believe that these animals have emotional lives every bit as complex as ours and yet continue to butcher them and slaughter them and then eat them. I mean, there's absolutely no justification for that. So I gave it up. And then I began wondering, well, I met Cesar Chavez, the great labor organizer.
Yeah, of course.
In California, briefly. And I said, I hear you're vegetarian. He said, no. I said, oh, I thought you didn't eat meat. He said, I don't, but I'm not a vegetarian. I'm a vegan. I said, what's that?
Yeah.
He said, I don't eat eggs or dairy or honey. I said, why not? He said, you'll have to figure that out for yourself. I got to go now. And he left me with that. And it took me many, many, many years before I understood what he was saying. So he was one of the first. I mean, my God, that must have been in the 60s.
Yeah, because as much as veganism has taken off recently, it still feels like you're controversial. It's
yes, I mean,
it's finding its way. I mean,
when you have as much as, some countries will have as much as 10% of the population is vegetarian, but still, that's, most of the people you meet are not going to be, and they're going to find you weird.
Well, it's the same. There's in all of these stories with psychoanalysis and the resistance to the truth and believing that there was more going on, more beneath the surface. And then with animals, it's the same thing. It's this kind of denial of truth and not wanting to dig any deeper into what could be there. And people really resist it. I think it's uncomfortable for them. So they just want to live in the world that was created, the superficial reality that's there. And they don't want to go further than that, it seems.
It's absolutely true. And I'm not the kind of person, especially now, who likes to question people's beliefs. So if somebody says that to me, I don't say, oh, that's really foolish. Why don't you do this or that? I just let it go.
Right.
It's, there has to, somebody has to be curious. If somebody says, I really would like to understand, then you can talk to them. But if that's idiotic and stupid.
I've always hated, how do you know if someone is a vegan? Because they'll tell you. I've always hated that. Yeah. Because actually I was born vegetarian too, and I actually just kind of avoid it as a topic because I don't like that feeling. Everyone
How come you were raised as a vegetarian?
Berkeley. Yeah, my parents were both vegetarian.
How did that come about?
Oh,
Berkeley.
Yeah, that's all I need to say.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, Berkeley was, among the first places to have vegan restaurants, lots of vegetarian restaurants. And
some Berkeleyans will say, oh, Berkeley, we're foodies, so we don't believe in that. So there's two sides to that.
That's it. If somebody says, I don't care if they suffer,
Right.
It doesn't matter to me. There's no argument for that. But
Yeah.
if people say, as so many farmers would say to me, I love my animals so much. And then they have this ridiculous phrase that I've never understood how they can say this without feeling ashamed. These animals have had a very good life and one bad day. And I think, my God, imagine saying that about your child.
Yeah.
My child will have a great life for 6 years, then he's going to have a very bad day when I kill him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just grotesque.
It is. Yeah.
And I honestly believe, Lindsay, that 30, 40, 50 years from now, people look back and say, how could we have thought that?
I do too.
What was the matter
hope.
with us?
Yeah. I think
I really believe that.
Yeah, I think that people who say they don't like animals, I hear people like that, and I just think you're just one relationship away from falling in love with an animal, because they are, the purity of their love and their openness to us is so transformative. In Lost Companions, your book about losing our animal companions when they die, it's so clear the relationships that people build with these animals are so deep. And you talk about the grief that they experience when even a fish or a turtle dies, and that's something that we shouldn't, that when we experience that grief, actually we're so acculturated to want to kind of, just downplay that, because that would be embarrassing, right? To care that much about an animal. But what we're actually experiencing is such an opening of our heart, and it's so profound, really. It's really powerful. And you say to accept that and to embrace it and to grieve for as long as you need to. And especially you make a note to parents who have children experiencing the death of a pet to respect their process.
Absolutely. Take it very seriously. Our 24-year-old son is in the EU. He's on the Myanmar desk. He's giving aid, which is severely needed right now, to Myanmar. And he said, Dad, every day I think about Benji, the dog.
Oh, yeah.
He was
with him.
Yeah. He was with him at the end.
Yeah.
And it's what, 2 years, and it's still very hard on him.
Yeah.
He said, there's not a day that I don't think about him. He was a family member, clearly.
Yes. Yeah, a family member.
A nice family member.
Oh.
Not some uncle that you wish you didn't have to see at Christmas or Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And so Benji was Benji the inspiration behind this? The Lost Companions?
Yeah, he was.
And
so there's a picture of my son with him at the very end in the last chapter.
I have that. Yeah. Here.
Yeah, that's Benji and my son Ilan, who's now at the European Union working there. But he grew up with that dog, and that dog was so close to him.
And you knew that Benji wasn't going to be alive and with you forever. So you wrote this to sort of prepare yourself, right?
That's right. That's right. And then at the end of the book, he did, in fact, die. And we have a younger son, so I had to stay with him here in Australia. But my wife, Lila, who was a pediatrician, loves children and animals, she flew to Berlin to be with Ilan, and then they took Benji to the country, and he had a last week with them, and then he gently died.
Have you ever heard Jimmy Stewart's poem about his dog who died?
No.
Oh, I'll read it for you.
I'd like to hear it. Can you read it to me?
Yes, I'll read it to you. And actually, you can find it on YouTube. He's on a late night talk show. I'm not sure with whom. And it's really, I know I'm not going to do it justice, because Jimmy Stewart, his delivery of anything is so beautiful. Yeah. So you have to listen to his version, also because he loved this dog so much, and it's so touching how he reads this. So it's called, I'll Never Forget a Dog Named Bo. He never came to me when I would call. unless I had a tennis ball, or he felt like it, but mostly he didn't come at all. When he was young, he never learned to heel or sit or stay. He did things his way. Discipline was not his bag. But when you were with him, things sure didn't drag. He'd dig up a rose bush just to spite me, and when I'd grab him, he'd turn and bite me. He bit lots of folks from day to day. The delivery boy was his favorite prey. The gas man wouldn't read our meter. He said we owned a real man-eater. He set the house on fire, but the story's long to tell. Suffice it to say that he survived, and the house survived as well. On the evening walks, and Gloria took him, he was always first out the door. The old one and I brought up the rear because our bones were sore. He would charge up the street with Mom hanging on. What a beautiful pair they were. And if it was still light and the tourists were out, they created a bit of a stir. But every once in a while, he would stop in his tracks and with a frown on his face look around. It was just to make sure that the old one was there and would follow him where he was bound. We are early to bedders at our house. I guess I'm the first to retire. And as I'd leave the room, he'd look at me and get up from his place by the fire. He knew where the tennis balls were upstairs, and I'd give him one for a while. He would push it under the bed with his nose, and I'd fish it out with a smile. And before very long, he'd tire of the ball and be asleep in his corner in no time at all. And there were nights when I'd feel him climb up on our bed and lie between us, and I'd pat his head. And there were nights when I'd feel this stare, and I'd wake up and he'd be sitting there. And I'd reach out my hand and stroke his hair, and sometimes I'd feel him sigh, and I think I know the reason why. He would wake up at night, and he would have this fear of the dark, of life, of lots of things, and he'd be glad to have me near. And now he's dead, and there are nights when I think I feel him climb upon our bed and lie between us, and I pat his head. And there are nights when I think I feel that stare, and I reach out my hand to stroke his hair, but he's not there. Oh, how I wish that wasn't so. I'll always love a dog named Bo.
How beautiful.
Ugh.
Well, you read that very well. I can hear the tremor in your voice. Did you ever lose a dog?
I lost a cat, but I am someone who, I'm so touched by your work because I've always felt a real connection to animals, and that there is so much beneath the surface, and that they are there offering us this perspective on love if we want to see it. So
yeah. Well, I mean, that captures that sentiment exactly.
Yeah.
And you don't get over that. You don't forget it. And I could see, even as you read it, it was bringing tears to your eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure anybody listening to it who lost a dog will start weeping.
Yeah.
And that's appropriate. That's what we should be doing. We should grieve these companions there. And there is something miraculous, I'd say mostly with dogs and cats, but that's because we have this relationship with them, which we can't really have with any other animal. We can't have that with any wild animal. Very rare. I mean, some people do, but it's extremely rare. But with dogs and cats, millions of people get to see what it's like to enter their world.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful. Sleeping with a cat is one of the great pleasures of life.
Yes.
And the fact that they trust you, that they purr, they put their little paws out, and they fall asleep knowing that they're safe. I mean, this is basically a wild animal still. They're not totally domesticated, unlike a dog.
Yeah. True.
I think that's why, if we lived in Malaga in Spain, and I noticed there was a colony of wild cats that lived on the beach. And they were really wild. You could not approach them. They had all been pets, but they became completely wild. But dogs can't do that. Dogs can't really exist without us.
No. We co-evolved, as you say, right?
I believe we did.
Yeah. And you don't like the idea of hierarchy in general.
I'm not a fan of hierarchy. In fact, it's so interesting. I spoke to my daughter, who's older than you. She lives in California. She's a nurse practitioner. and she's been just offered a job in Northampton to lead a memory clinic at the university hospital.
Mm.
And she said, Dad, I can't accept it. I said, why? It's a great job. I can't stand hierarchy. She said, I don't want to be the head of anything.
Yeah.
I don't want to be under somebody, and I don't want to be over anybody. I just want to be myself.
Yeah.
I just want to be with my dog and my 4-year-old boy and my wife, and I'm just not interested in a hierarchy.
Yeah.
I said, where did you get that from? From you, she said. You don't like hierarchy. I don't. I really don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that appears so much in our relationship with animals, in training dogs, and raising children too. The idea of connecting to be respected in a way, as opposed to using obedience as your main goal. That's something that I'm learning
that
about.
I believe the world is changing too. You know,
Yeah.
This is similar with the attitude toward women. You know,
Yeah.
women should obey. You should listen to me.
Yeah.
She just won't listen, they say.
Yeah. My God. Thank God I live in this year. Okay.
Yes.
Can we talk just a little bit about your other books? The Peaceable Kingdom. What was that you were doing?
Well, that was one of my great failures, I have to admit. It was a great idea. So what happened is a publisher approached me. I said, we're going to give you a lot of money for you to write a book about raising baby animals together to see if they'll all become friends. I said, well, that sounds like a dream come true. You're going to give me money to do that? I would do it for nothing.
Yeah.
And they did. And what I did is I got a bunny rabbit, very young, 2 chicks, very young, a new dog, a new cat, and what else did I get? And 3 rats, all babies. And I determined that I was going to expose them to one another, and I would raise the Peaceable Kingdom. Now, I did. I was successful. I thought it was just an adorable idea because the cat and the rabbit slept together, and I have a picture of the rabbit putting his arms, the cat putting his arms around the rabbit when they went to sleep. And we were living on a beach in New Zealand at the time, and there were no cars. You couldn't get to the beach by car. So late at night, I'd go for a walk with the dog, the cats, the rabbit, the chickens. I'd carry the rats.
Wow.
And it was just paradise. And I loved it. And they would play together. I thought, this is amazing.
You must have been quite the character in town.
Pardon?
You must have been quite the character in town.
Well, nobody knew it because it was midnight. I would go.
Okay.
The full moon, that's when they liked to do it.
Okay.
And you couldn't go when there were dogs around because they they would kill the rabbit or the chickens. But the book sold no copies.
Oh.
I don't know why. You know, I thought that was right after I had 2 books that each sold 1 million copies.
Yeah.
And my publisher was convinced this would sell 2 million. I think it sold 200 or something.
Wow.
So you never know. You know, a lot of it is just luck.
Yeah.
But it was fun. I enjoyed that immensely, doing that. And I had gotten a lot of neighbors interested, and everybody would come over and help. And I mean, it was a fun experiment. And I believe it succeeded. Definitely was able to show that if you raise these animals together, you expose them to one another, they'll love each other.
Oh, yeah, a little paradise.
Yeah.
And in the pig, yes, I'm sure. The pig who sang to the moon. I hope it's not a spoiler. Can you tell us if there is a pig who sings to the moon?
Well, there was actually. There was. So that's on that very beach that I just described. We went to New Zealand first just for vacation, and a friend said, I hear you're writing this book about farm animals. Well, you must go and visit this beach because there's a pig who lives on the beach. And so I went down. I was very eager to see this pig who lived on the beach, but unfortunately the neighbors had complained, and the pig went off to a macadamia orchard where it would do nothing but eat macadamia nuts, and it became huge. But I did visit the pig. But then the person who lived with the pig told me once, he said, you know, the strange thing is this pig, whenever there was a full moon, used to go outside and sit on the edge of the ocean and look up at the moon and start making sounds. Sounded like he was singing.
Wow.
So when I heard it, that's it. The pig who sang to the moon. There's my title.
Yeah.
And in the end, I had a terrible argument with the man because I said, well, I love the way you love this pig. And I take it, of course, you would never eat a pig. He said, oh, no. He said, I have bacon all the time. I said, well, how can you do that? Well, I love that pig. I didn't love other pigs.
Yeah.
That pig is like every other pig.
Yeah.
There was that real kind of denial.
Yes.
You couldn't see.
Yeah.
Yes, he loved that pig, but that didn't have any implications for his life.
Yeah, I know.
If you can fall in love with an animal and not want to kill it, that has implications for how you should live.
Yes. Yeah. It's that simple, really. It's just,
it's not difficult. It's really not.
There's no way to get it across to people just how enormous the numbers are.
Well, I mean, possibly 60 billion animals a year are killed if you include fish every year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's extraordinary. When you
and
think about
so hidden from view.
It's hidden from view. It's unnecessary. It's mean. It's bad for your health. It's destroying the planet.
And it's bad for the
glad
people.
To see that many, pardon?
It's bad for I think of the people who have to do the work, the workers.
I mean, I feel very sorry for them. The amount of domestic abuse within those families is huge because they're exposed to this violence every single day and they hate it.
Yeah.
You know, these are people in America who can't do anything else. They're often people from
undocumented, right?
Yeah, undocumented workers from Latin America. They don't want to do that.
Right.
It's terrible work, and it's coarsening. You know, when you have to kill a certain number of animals every minute, you go home in a very bad mood.
And I think that it feeds something sadistic in eating animals. Yeah.
Of course.
Do you think that you could just give us a few happy stories?
I remember the first time I went to a sanctuary called Animal Place at University of California at Davis. It's right near there. And one of the professors and his wife, Kim Sturla, they had this sanctuary, and I was visiting, riding the pig who sang to the moon. So I was visiting all of these farm animals who had been on farms and were rescued. And there were a number of pigs, and I knew nothing about pigs. So Kim was telling me, you know, Jeff, pigs are not what people think. Just look at them. They're wagging their tail because they know we're talking about them, just like a dog. They sleep at the foot of my bed because they're such clean animals.
Wow.
And I love them, and they love me. And I was talking to her, and we were walking, and we were going up into the hills, and suddenly I had this feeling I was being followed, and I turned around, and there were 3 pigs following us. And I said, what are they doing? They're like dogs. They like to be around humans. If you're nice to them, they'll be exactly like a dog.
Yeah.
And I thought they get such a bad reputation, pigs.
Yeah.
When in fact, they're intelligent, they're affectionate, they're compassionate. They're just wonderful beings.
And
And
they're just not furry.
Gentle beings, too.
Yeah. Yeah. They actually have a therapy pig that at San Francisco airport visit every so often.
Really?
Yeah.
I love the idea of therapy animals.
Yes. And there's a woman, I don't know how she worked out the agreement, who has this pig, and I think it wears a tutu sometimes and nail polish. And so again, it's just the idea that they cheer us up and they light us up somehow.
I mean, if you live with an animal, your life is enriched. There's no doubt about it. You will be happier. You will be healthier. You will be more gentle towards humans and animals. I mean, the best thing, I always my wife's a pediatrician. She always tells people, if you can, get a dog for your child.
Oh.
As early as possible, because they learn about compassion, they learn to be gentle, they learn about love.
Yes.
And they form these very deep attachments.
Yeah. And it's a best
And they
friend
never
for them.
disappoint them.
No.
The dog is never going to say the wrong thing.
That's true. There's another story I was thinking of that maybe you haven't seen, and it made me wonder what's going on in the animal world in terms of communication. There's this video on YouTube called Battle at Kruger. It's not a known video. It's not like Christian the Lion, but it's some people somewhere in Africa, and they see a buffalo.
Oh, I saw that.
Yes. And
it's amazing.
Yeah, the lions and the crocodile are attacking the baby buffalo, and the rest of the buffalo herd, there's actually, you don't see the whole herd at all in the beginning. It's just a few of them, and they run away, they escape, but they know that the baby's been being attacked.
And suddenly this moment they stop and they turn around. Oh, it's just, it's the ultimate vengeance scene.
Yes, but what my thinking went to was, wait, how did they, without language, somehow go over to the rest of the herd and say, hey, Billy's in trouble over here, come help? You know, they have.
It's mysterious. I have watched that, I think, 20 times.
Yeah.
And everybody, all of your listeners, just go to YouTube and look at it. It's astonishing.
Incredible.
I don't know how many hundreds of millions of people have seen it, because it's a feel-good story too. They
the ending is good.
Back, and he's not hurt, and he goes off. But like you, I wondered, they're terrified of these lions, and they run away. And then suddenly, like one body, they just stop, like, what the? Hey, wait a minute. And they turn around, and then they come thundering. And the lions look up like, hey, what are they doing here? And then they leave real fast.
Yeah.
And they toss one of them into the air. They learned a lesson, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
But, I mean, how can you look at that and not say that they felt love and protectiveness towards this little calf?
You can't.
They did.
Yeah.
It's been lovely talking to you.
Yes.
I think you and I are really on the same wavelength.
Oh, thanks.
I don't think there's any room for difference between us.
No. Thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure.